Kia ora.
Welcome to the NZ Ahead podcast. Everything you need to know about moving to and living in New Zealand.
There's a whole world here.
So nice to be with you again.
You'll be right.
Kia ora.
We call it Aotearoa around here, bro.
We are your hosts, Liz and Brian.
Amazing New Zealand in the southern seas.
See, that's where I belong. That's home.
Hello and welcome to the NZ Ahead podcast. Hello, Ryan. Welcome back. I'm so excited to have you back on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Oh.
Wait, the first one was so well received. Oh, wait, we don't know that.
We've had a mass of people asking for you to come back.
Yeah. Craziness.
So if anyone doesn't know, Ryan and I talked in the last podcast with Ryan. We talked about Ryan living in the Auckland area. If you haven't heard that podcast or watched that video, go and watch it because it's amazing. But today I was not going to let you get away, Ryan. I just had to keep hold of you because you have got some fascinating stories about and information about people, you know, if you've moved from the United States to New Zealand 4 years ago. And yeah, you've just got a wealth of knowledge that you very, very kindly have agreed to share with us. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to jump straight in because you're a talker and I'm a talker. And we could just keep going for hours and hours, me and you, couldn't we? But Ryan,
absolutely.
The question that I get, or the perception that I get from a lot of people is that they would like to move to New Zealand, but they see the wages. You know, they Google their job and then they see the job opportunities and they see the wages and they're like, no way, I can't take that much of a pay cut. And I just want you to talk because that was similar to your experience, wasn't it?
Sure.
Can you just talk about that?
Sure. I think one of the first things that I usually try to tell people when looking at coming over from the States is, first and foremost, do not convert money. Don't look at the salary and say, well, if I think of it in U.S. dollars, don't do that, okay? Because you don't spend U.S. dollars when you're living here. You know, you spend New Zealand dollars.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of think in terms of absolute dollars and just say, if, you know, 50,000 U.S. dollars versus 50,000 New Zealand dollars, that's your salary. Yeah. That's your pay. The next thing I usually tell people is that online is a New Zealand tax calculator. If you Google that, it'll take it, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head.
That's all right. I'll find it and put it in the description.
Yeah, it's something. It's really good. I can always email it to you to let you know which one it is. But that gives you a really good indication of the exact dollars that you are going to have for, you know, your day-to-day living.
Right.
And for Americans, that concept is alien. Because I know when I first started looking around, I had a friend of mine that I worked with that said to me, oh, you realize that New Zealand's tax rate is so much higher and you're not going to have any money, blah, 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 you know, that kind of
nice
ideology.
Positive friend.
Right. And so he was just like, you got to be realistic, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, well, I managed to find this tax calculator that I was talking about. And I looked at it and I said, well, that's really bizarre because it is not a lot different than my current paycheck. Okay? Right. And I come to find out when I got here and verified that it was true, it's because in the U.S., when you have your salary and they take out line items, there's a bunch of them. Okay? They don't just take out tax, right? They take out tax, which is at the tax rate, and then they take out stuff like Social Security, and they take out this and that, and then they take out stuff like health care and all these kind of things.
Right.
And at the end of the day, that number's not a whole lot different. Just in New Zealand, it's just one number. And it's already got your, here it's superannuation, not Social Security, right? It's already got health care, and it's already got all that stuff built in.
Yeah.
So that's all that comes out of your paycheck. And Americans are so used to being nickeled and dimed that they're at least this was for me. I was always looking and going, where else are they going to take my money?
Right.
Because it's a very American thing, right? When I go in and I say, I'm going to get a phone plan, and they tell me, well, your phone plan is going to be $49.99, and I go, great, and my first bill is $60-something. And I go, well, that doesn't make any sense, because they're adding all these extra fees and the taxes and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And all of that is built into the pricing here, which is the same as UK, right?
Yeah. And it's like you say, even when you go to the shopping, when you go to the supermarket in America and you're like, oh, that's not bad, $4.99, and then it adds tax on that on top of that, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And depending on where you live will depend on how much tax.
Really? It's not just one thing across the United States?
Each state has a different sales tax rate, and each state has an income tax rate, because you can have federal taxes and you can have state income taxes. And depending on where you live, you can have local tax as well.
Right.
So here there is just essentially the way Americans would think of it. There's a federal tax. That's your income tax, and that's it. That one number that comes out. And when you account for the fact that superannuation works a lot differently than Social Security, because in the U.S., Social Security is purely based on how much money you have put into the system. And then they use some fancy calculation to determine how much money they're going to give you, as opposed to a superannuation where it's more based on cost of living. Right? And so when you think about those things and say, oh, so there's a whole lot more social safety nets. When I'm old, I'm going to get more money being here and paying into this system than I would be if I were in the States. And then you think about the whole healthcare system and how that all works, and you say to yourself, wow, so there's not a whole lot of other payouts. So that one number that comes out is a very broad range of things that you get for that.
That's a really, really good point. Because I know that you said to me, without going too personal, but I know you said to me you took like a 30% wage cut, didn't you, when you came to New Zealand? But you've actually saved, what is it you said?
Yeah. Well, I think I personally took maybe a 10%.
Oh, right.
But my wife, because she's a school teacher, she hadn't gotten all of her school stuff set up, because the whole NZQA process takes a while to verify your credentialing, and it's one thing that does all the credentialing like in the whole country, so it can take a little bit of time. So she took some jobs making a bit less than she would. So our total combined income was probably, as a household income, I think probably we dropped 30 to 40% when we first moved here.
And that frightens some people when they think about that, doesn't it?
It does. You know? And if you translate it into US dollars, you look at it as an even further drop, right? But we found, like, when she was here, she did a couple of little short, part-time jobs that equated to almost full-time work. And she was working at, I think, just over minimum wage. But minimum wage is, at the time, I think it was between 15 and 17 or something like that. So she cobbled together a couple of part-time jobs and still managed to make 30,000+ a year all of a sudden. And you're going, oh, wait, you can do that? Because you're not concerned about, again, the healthcare thing, which is always a big thing in the States, right? So you just look at these things and you go, oh, you can do that, And we found that we actually saved more money even though we were making less money.
That's bizarre, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It was very strange, because we looked around and we went, I don't understand. Food's more expensive, housing costs in comparison to the U.S., if looking at absolute dollars, you're still going, well, this is more expensive and that's more expensive. And you go, well, eating out is more expensive. But then you start realizing, is eating out that much more expensive?
I know.
When you consider, I look at, the U.S. where I could get, okay, here's a $10 hamburger at this restaurant. Okay. Oh, but then we got sales tax.
Yeah.
And I lived in an area that was near 10% sales tax. So that $10 burger is $11. And now I have to pay probably a 20% or so tip. So that $10 burger is now about $13 or so dollars. And that same equation goes in with the other stuff you buy.
Yeah.
And you go, or I go down to the pub down here.
If you dream of moving to New Zealand, then you are going to love what I'm about to share with you. 12 years ago, when me and Bri emigrated to New Zealand, we were scouring the internet, trying to find any information that we could about what our life would be like when we got here. And basically all we had was YouTube. So we made this vow. We said, when we get to New Zealand, we're going to create something that we can share with others that answers those questions that you're so desperate to know about. Like, what is your life going to be like when you get here? And that's what I'm here to offer you today. We have created a 5-day free, absolutely free video guide that shows you what it's really like to live in New Zealand. This stuff is unique and it is fabulous. You are not going to find it anywhere else on the internet. And like I say, it's absolutely free. You'll be sent a video every day for 5 days and you will know what it's like in New Zealand. So head over to the website. It's www.nzahead/free. One more time, that's www.nzahead/free. You are going to love it.
And that same equation goes in with the other stuff you buy.
Yeah.
And you go, or I go down to the pub down here and I can get a $15 burger.
And that's it. That's the price, isn't it?
Yeah. You walk in, you say, I want my $15 burger. Your bill is $15.
Yeah.
Right? And I found that the quality of food is significantly better here. So I go, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm paying an extra $2.
Yeah.
You know, it's really not that big of a difference. And that's just been mostly my experience.
Yeah. And also, like, it's funny how you say about the, you know, how you keep comparing it. Because when we first came here, I would constantly, I did that thing where it's like, well, that's £2.50. I'm not paying that, you know, and it was like, oh, that's £10. But actually, and I was convinced that the UK, well, where we lived in England, I was convinced, and literally, I truly believed that it was much cheaper to eat out in the UK than it was in New Zealand. And then a couple of years ago, we went back to England for a holiday, and I think I don't know, we went out for a coffee and a sandwich, and it came to like £8, which to me would be like, oh, it's only £8. But actually, that's $16, you know, and you can get a lot for lunch in New Zealand for $16. So, yeah, absolutely. It's weird how you do that. You keep converting it back, you know? Yeah,
and the only reason to convert, in my opinion, is when you're bringing money in or sending money out.
Yeah.
You know, if I were earning US dollars, I might do the conversion. Or if I had to make U.S. payments.
Yeah.
Because one of the things we did was we made sure we paid off all of our debt in the States.
Before you left the States.
Yeah, because we knew if we were going to be making less, you know, dollar for dollar, doing that conversion, all of a sudden that payment does go up. So we just said, no, let's get rid of all of our debt. Let's pay that off, so that we can go and not have to spend US dollars on stuff.
Yeah. And I just want to talk to you about the healthcare system, because in the United States, honestly, I mean, well, you're going to tell me, but I just remember we had like a guest come over from New York, Rochester, and he was telling us that he was paying like how much was it, Brian? About $500 a month, was it? Or?
He was paying more than that.
Yeah.
He was paying $3,000 a month for a family of 6.
$3,000 a month. $3,000 a month for a family of 6 on healthcare.
Now that's a lot. I mean, even for me, I'd look at that and go, that's pretty high. I'm guessing they had very little deductible. There's always a calculation in your brain. In the U.S., you kind of have to be an amateur lawyer, an amateur doctor, and an amateur accountant. Okay, you have to be able to at least be able to do something on those if you don't want to be, you know, ridiculous about things. With the healthcare system, there's so many different avenues. It's not I could talk for hours on this because I worked in both sides of the healthcare industry in the U.S. Because I was living in Nashville and worked for a bunch of healthcare providers, and I worked in insurance.
Right.
So I'm fascinated by the whole thing because it's horribly broken. So here, I like to tell people about our first encounter with the New Zealand healthcare system, and that involved my daughter. I think we were here a month or 2 months, and she was across the street jumping on the neighbor's trampoline.
Yeah. And
they had forgot to zip the bottom of the net. Somehow she managed to fall and roll in the perfect way to go under the little, where the zipper was supposed to be zipped. She slid down. She hits her head on concrete. Okay. We hear her screaming from across the street. We go running, of course, and we get her, and there's like blood coming out of the back of her head. And as Americans, I swear, both my wife and I had the thought of, it's probably not that bad. She'd probably be okay if we don't take her to the doctor. There's this welt developing on the back of her head. There's blood coming out. And our first thought was, she'll be fine.
Why? Because
healthcare is so expensive that you have to start weighing, is it worth the several $1,000s this is probably going to cost me? So we call up the free health line where you talk to an actual nurse, and the nurse, I'm sure the nurse thought we were ridiculous for even asking the question of what do you think we should do? Okay, it's like your child has a head wound that she is bleeding. So we're like, fine, we'll take her. So we go through this process that involves my wife going to, kind of one of those little emergent care kind of places, but they were closing. So then took an ambulance to the hospital, and she would call me up and give me, here's what's going on. And I just kept thinking, how much is this going to cost me? I mean, an ambulance, that might be $1,000. And that's da-da-da. So we go through this whole process. And by the time all is said and done, we got this bill in the mail, and it was for the whole thing. She was with the doctor for hours. They had to watch her. She ended up having a concussion. And we got this little thing that said, well, it should cost you $50, but ACC kicked in because it was an accident, so it cost you nothing.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
And first off, we were like, what is ACC? Like, why are they paying our bills? So just to have that experience and go, okay, wait, this cost us nothing, And so we looked into it, and, you find that children up until the age of, and I still don't know what it is, I want to say it's around 12, 13.
Yeah, I think it's 12 or 13. It might even be older than that.
Yeah, they cost nothing.
No.
Going to the doctor, prescriptions.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Did it say on the bottom of your bill? P.S. We've spoken to the nurse. Shame on you, Daddy.
Yeah, should have. Absolutely should have. Oh yeah, it's so crazy. I've taken the kids to a couple of specialists nowadays. In the last 4 years, right? That happens sometimes with kids, and it's nothing, and it still just breaks my head.
So even for a specialist, they don't charge?
No, not for children. Really?
I didn't know that.
I'm sure if you pushed and tried to get to see a specialist that your doctor didn't justify or something like that.
Yeah.
That's
amazing.
It's just like in the States where you go through your GP, right? Yeah, where you just kind of go through and say, yeah, what do you think? And then they'll say, yeah, you probably should. Yeah. But it didn't cost. My son went to see, I think, an ear specialist down in the CBD, and it was like nothing. Cost us nothing.
That's great, isn't it? That's absolutely great.
Yeah. And then when I look at my own bills, that's also significantly different.
And I know I told you this before when we were chatting, but when the kids were small, we went to Vegas on holiday, and I've never ever forgotten this. And literally, we went to Vegas on holiday, and we were staying in this really nice hotel, and it had, like Vegas, where they have the big windows overlooking.
Yeah.
And I think Tess was about 6 or 7, something like that, and she ran to the window. It was dark, and she ran to the window to look at the fountains and the lights, and she slipped and hit her chin on the window ledge, and her tooth went through her lip. And same, I'm like the opposite to you, Ryan. I was like, oh my God, get her to the hospital. And we phoned down to the reception in the hotel, thinking that they were going to say, oh, Mrs. Deacle, don't worry, we'll have someone up there, stretcher, and bring her down. And they went, okay, we'll be there in a moment. And we're like, like you say, loads of blood, and Tessa's screaming, and I'm crying, And you know what, Ryan? I opened the door, and there was 2 guys in a suit and a woman with a clipboard and a pencil, and they didn't even look at Tessa. They just said, "Can we just ask you a few questions?" And all they wanted to know was whether we were going to sue them. Basically, it was horrible. It was horrible.
Yeah. It brings to mind that same situation that Millie falling out of the trampoline, because the other thoughts that we had to do with costs. And in the States, we would look at that and go, okay, it happened in our neighbor's yard, so the neighbor is now liable for the things that happen in their yard. So even though it's my child on their trampoline, they are technically liable. So I could go, and whatever the cost was, I could go and say, you should pay part of this, because it happened on your property.
But would you do that? Would you do that? Do people actually do that?
Oh, people do it all the time. I don't know that I could, but it's very. I mean, there are. Yeah, you can actually look for stories out of the U.S. Making sure I didn't hit my button. In the U.S. of stuff like somebody broke into somebody's house, and got locked in their garage, or broke their leg while breaking into someone's houses, and that person whose house they broke into still was liable.
Oh no!
for some of that stuff.
It's
crazy. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's why not many people in the States will have stuff like trampolines. They're all over the place here.
Yeah.
But in the States you wouldn't have it, because if some stranger decided to walk into your backyard, bounce on your trampoline, and they fell off and hurt themselves, you would be liable, even if you didn't know they were even there.
That is crazy.
It's why people build fences around their pools, and that kind of stuff, because you recognize you're liable for all those healthcare costs that could happen.
I know when we went to Florida to see Bry's brother, and we were driving along in the car, and there was some kids on a scooter, cycling, scooting along. And we wound down the windows, and we were going, go on, boys, go on, do it, And Bry's brother said, don't shout anything out the window. Don't do that. Put the window up and stop it, And we're I don't know. It just feels like you can't say anything to people, or, why? Why couldn't you do that? I don't know whether...
Yeah.
Maybe he thought they were going to get a gun and shoot us or something.
Well, and you always just have to be conscious, because everything you say is just potential for somebody to try to sue you on something. I mean, it's just a very litigious culture. Oh. The first company I worked for was we did software for law firms in the U.S., and I remember trying to explain to a lot of my coworkers just various experience I'd had in the States, and then just go, oh yeah, because you got to watch out. If you do this, then you could do that, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And there were people just going, how can you live through that? I mean, how do you deal with the stress that comes from living in the U.S.? And they were just, I'd lose my mind. It's it's not abnormal, in the U.S. to lose your mind.
Even in the, even where we lived in Bath, I've talked about this before, but it got to the point where you were too scared to, I'm not saying beep, beeping your horn, but it got to the point, or certainly when we were there 12 years ago, it was at that point where you daren't you know, you then like beep someone to say, you know, what are you doing? Like, you know, like you used to be able to just do that. No, I'm not talking like road rage, and I'm not talking like being aggressive, but literally now, like
hey, you cut me off.
Yeah, you always used to do that, didn't you? Well, we always used to do it, and my brother was in the police, and he just said, don't do that. Do not do that to people, he said, because they could have, you know, they could come after you, they could have, it's like, it's just, I know you shouldn't go around beeping people, but I don't know, it's just... So, but you're right. Yeah. And then when you live somewhere that doesn't have that, you know, that aggression and that fear all the time, it just, your stress levels just lower, don't they? And it's just
that absolutely. You know, I like to tell people about my various encounters with the police in the U.S.
Oh, go on.
Where I joke about stuff like, I said, look, I'm the picture of like average white dude, right, in the U.S. And I grew up in and around Baltimore City, and there was one point where friends of mine, I think there were 4 of us in the car, and we were teenagers, and it was probably, you know, midnight or so. I think we had been somewhere, saw a movie or something, coming home. My friend gets pulled over, and he's driving, I'm in the passenger seat, and he starts shuffling around in the glove compartment looking for his wallet because he's got to get his license and registration. And I just kept going. I have my hand on the front, just going, put your hands away, put your hands away, put your hands away. No, don't, just put your hands on the steering wheel. And he's like, I've got to get this, I've got to. And all of a sudden, there were flashlights on either side of the car and guns drawn on us. And here we are, just 4 teenagers in the car.
Couple of kids, yeah.
Yeah.
Were you really scared?
Well, I think I was less so, mostly because, I mean, you can have lots of conversations around this, but I also acknowledge the fact that I am white. Okay, so, you know, knowing all the stuff that goes on in the States, with Black Lives Matter and all that, my perspective is going to be way different. So I didn't think that they were legitimately going to shoot me.
Right. Okay.
As long as we did what they told us.
Yeah.
It's scary, but at least you have that moment of going, if I do what they say, they won't shoot me.
Yeah.
You know, that's been my experience. But yeah, it's just funny to have that. I mean, I lived in a house one time in Nashville, and I just heard screaming out my back window. And I was like, well, that's weird. So I look out, and I see several police officers with guns drawn at the house behind me. And I just went, I'll go watch TV in the basement right now. You know, it's like, it's underground. I won't get shot. You know, it's just the way you have to think.
See, I think I'd be the one that'd be like at the curtains like that, and end up getting shot. So I'm so nosy.
And you learn not to be. I mean, just in most U.S. cities, you just learn not to be. It's like, I'm just going to go downstairs because I don't want to get shot.
Yeah, you know what? Whenever I talk to Americans, I realize what a sheltered life I've had, because honestly, like you telling me that about the trampoline and stuff, it's like you can't believe that goes on, you know, and just people saying about anyway, yeah.
It's very different.
It is, yeah.
You just grow accustomed to it. I mean, even within the country, there are areas that, you know, are better than others. When I was growing up, Baltimore and Washington, D.C., really close to each other. They were both kind of, in the U.S. in the 90s, those two and Detroit were kind of the 3 murder capitals of the U.S., right? They were the, per capita, they were some of the highest rated cities. So you just got used to it. You know, it was, you'd listen to the news and somebody was shot every day. It wasn't if someone, it was how many. And even when I moved to Nashville, I remember experiencing, I think somebody early on had gotten shot, and it was like this big news story. I was like, it's just one guy, you know, and that was one of those moments where I went, oh, I am way too desensitized, you know, to that style of life.
But if you're used to it, then, you know, if it's happening every day, then you would become accustomed to it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and it's kind of sad in a lot of ways, but it's a reality of how human beings cope, right?
Right, so let's move on to the So you've said about the wages and like the healthcare is just huge, isn't it? What about the housing? How did you find the housing?
It's massive. From where I was living, the housing is more expensive.
In New Zealand?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Now, looking at it, and there's areas in the U.S. that are relatively comparable to Auckland, but for the most part, from an actual housing expense, you have to expect that your housing expenses in New Zealand are something like 40 to 50% of your wages. I think it's gotten to be about that high. And you have to understand that is normal. It's scary on paper, but you start to recognize that is your biggest expense, and that is your primary expense. Everything else just, like we said, your food's probably technically a little more expensive when you go through the stores. Some of that is mitigated.
I don't think you're talking masses, though, are you? Certainly not from the UK.
Especially not having conversations with my parents here recently, talking about the inflation rate and everything, and how expensive food has gotten in the States. But you're not talking a massive difference. And then, kind of as we talk about, GST is included in the price. So, that's another thing that Americans are kind of trained to do, of looking at something and going, okay, this $4.99 item is actually going to be, $4.50 or $4.40 or whatever the rate is in your specific area. Or $4.99. I should have said $5 something or other. But either way, you're just trained to think in terms of how much is the sales tax. Since most states have it, that's how your brain automatically processes things. So when you go up to the register and that doesn't happen, it's a reprogramming. It's another one of those reprogramming things that you have to do as an American in New Zealand.
I think coming from the UK, I think it's I want to say it's easier to adjust because we have free healthcare in the UK. We have everything's included in the price in our food, so we don't have that to think about. So it's probably, I can see why people coming from the United States find it so much harder to adjust.
Yeah. There's so much of that goes on in your brain, and you're always thinking. For me, I spent a lot of time saying, "What's the catch?" Yeah. In my brain, and I kept kind of going like, "I don't. Why are you doing that?" And
what are you after?
Yeah. What's going on? I mean, it took me a while. I'm so used to, let's say, cost of meds. Okay, I've got allergies and asthma and this kind of stuff that I take meds to maintain. And just to think about the cost of meds in the United States, is significantly different. So for me, a lot of our cost savings, I'm going to tell you, in my family, huge cost savings were healthcare. I mean, that was huge because once I figured out that each one of my prescriptions is $5, and that's $5 for a 3-month supply of something. Yeah. Because I remember getting something that they were like, "Oh, you've got a couple repeats," and I'm like, "Okay." And if I'd forget to fill them, I would be like, "I don't care. That's." I just didn't have to spend the money. That's great. And then it was like, "Oh no, your repeats are free." And I went, "Wait a minute. You didn't tell me that." So now I put it on my calendar because I still think I need to hoard my medication, for if I have less money. Because there were times where I remember having to pay out of pocket for one of my asthma, one of my inhalers.
Inhalers, yeah.
And it was something like $350 out of pocket.
That's crazy.
And even when I had insurance, it still ended up being between maybe $50, $60. So I probably spent, just on myself, probably between $60 and $70 a month on in meds.
That's just greedy, that is.
Yeah. And now to go, I spend about $50 or $60 a year. So these kind of things are massive differences to think about. Yeah.
What about utility bills like gas bill and electric and things like that? How does that compare? Hang on, just stop a minute. Just stop a minute, Ryan, because I can hear a clicking. Can you hear that? No, it's just when I'm talking. I'm wondering what. Can you hear that?
No, is it this?
No. It's just like a clicking noise. No?
I don't. I wonder if it's me just hitting something.
I'm just worried. Okay. Do I need to clap now if I'm going to go on again, Brian? No. Okay. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah. So. No
worries.
So the utility bills.
Okay, so utility bills, I found this particularly interesting because at least in the area of Auckland that we live in, there's not a lot of houses with central heating and air conditioning.
Right.
Okay. So the electric bill, for example, I think per wattage hour or whatever is more expensive. But my utility bills, my electric tends to still be cheaper. Just because of the idea that we're not constantly running something, heating, air conditioning, or whatnot.
Yeah, good point,
so even in the wintertime when you would normally, when there's snow on the ground in the States, you got to have the heat going in the whole house. But here, there's a lot. It's different heating, and that's another whole thing to get used to. Where our entire top floor has nothing. We have no heating, no air conditioning, nothing. And that's where all the bedrooms are.
Do you want me to send Brian out to have a word with you?
Yeah.
He does heating, in case you don't know.
Yeah. No, trust me, next time you're up. We don't have a real great location for anything on the top floor, so we may have somebody come in at some point. But for the most part, we've got it in the main living area, and that's where we use it if we need it. But, like I say, if it's a sunny day, the house is warm.
Yeah.
We're all right. We have little space heaters for the bedrooms and turn them on really low just to kind of get the chill out of the air. So little things like that. But we just find we don't...
You don't use as many things.
No.
You don't have to put the iron on because you don't need to iron your clothes in New Zealand. Don't need to dry your hair.
Nobody cares.
No.
And I think that's, in America, we're so used to kind of what I would consider the Amazon effect, where we buy a lot of stuff that we don't need just because it's easy and convenient. And you recognize quickly in New Zealand that nothing is easy and convenient when it comes to purchasing things, besides your essentials, So you kind of don't continue with that kind of extreme consumerism. Yeah. I mean, you can try, but it's going to frustrate you a whole lot.
Good luck with that.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree,
Yeah, you just find you do with less.
Yeah, you do. You do. And you realise what's important, don't you? And it's just having all like you say, a wardrobe full of clothes. Well, what's the point? It's just... That's how I felt anyway. Yeah. When we were in the UK, we would shop so much, spend every Saturday going shopping. And here, I can't remember the last time I went shopping for clothes. Poor old Bri. I wanted to ask you about, while we were on the houses, do you pay capital gains tax in America, in the US?
Capital gains is, that's always fun. It depends on what you do with it.
What you do with your property, or?
Yeah, if you have the house, I spent some time in the mortgage industry in the U.S. So if you, let's say, sell a house, normally if you sell it for significantly more than you bought it for, you might have to pay capital gains. But you don't if you put it into your next house, for example.
Right, okay, I'm with you. Yeah, right.
So there's ways around it.
Yeah. So if you bought a house and you did it up and you made like 200,000 profit, and then you just thought, oh well, I'm just going to sit in a field with my 200,000, then you would get taxed on that money.
Potentially. Right? Yeah. Now there's some people that would say, well, it's only 200,000. I can probably get away with not declaring it.
Oh, I like it. Okay, let's not go there.
That's the whole difference in the U.S. tax system, right? It goes along with what I was talking about at the beginning, where the idea that you could know what number your taxes are going to be.
Yeah.
Before the week, before the year is over.
Yeah.
Because it is just standard. Everything is just super standard here. Everything's super easy from a tax perspective, and all the stuff that Americans think about with taxes, I won't say don't exist, because they do on some level, but for the average person, it's not really a thing. If you donate money to charities and such, you don't. In the States, you would try to take that off of your income, so that you're taxed at a lower rate.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Whereas here it's just you do your income separately, and then if you give money at the end of the year or whatever, you just declare, hey, here's the documentation I have, and they say, great, we'll write you a check for a third of it. Or I shouldn't even say write checks, because nobody uses checks in this country, which is something Americans need to learn. No checks.
Well, not to use checks, yeah.
Yes.
It's really funny because down at our local garage, gas station, petrol station, there's a big sign on the wall that says something like, "We only accept checks if we know you and trust you," or just something like, and if we don't and it bounces, then do not think that you're going to get away with it. And it's just like this big long thing about checks. It's so funny.
Well, I don't think I've ever seen anybody in this country write a check.
No.
I don't.
I love
it just
checks.
Doesn't happen.
It's great when you got a check. Yeah, well, when you used to get a check in the post, it was so nice, wasn't it? I like it. I mean,
it was nice for the time, but nowadays I like to be able to look at my bank account and go, oh, it's already there. I don't have to wait for it to process or anything. Yeah.
Can you talk to me? Can you talk to me for a minute about mortgages? What how does that work? What's the difference? Is it easier to get a mortgage in New Zealand, or is it easier to get a mortgage in the USA?
I'm going to answer that question in a slightly different way, and I'll explain why. It's easier to buy a house in the United States.
Right.
The whole getting a mortgage is different in the sense that here you have to put money down. And for the most part, your minimum is 10%. Mm-hmm. Okay? It's supposed to be 20, but you can still work at a slightly higher interest rate for 10% mortgage. So in that sense, in the States, it's easier to go, I can work this mortgage and I can get 100% financing. Or if you go what's called like FHA, you can even go 103% if it's like the only house you own.
Right.
So from that sense, it's easier. But in the sense of the mortgage side of things, I found it easier here.
Okay. Why?
Because there's not as much paperwork. It tends to be pretty clean, where you just kind of go, look, I make this much money, and they look and go, yeah, you do, and they can look and they go, yeah, okay. Since everything is so automated here, it's a whole lot easier to compare things.
Yeah.
You're not spending all this time getting all this paperwork from the 12 different places and try to prove that you can pay this loan. Okay, Everything here is, oh, just give me a printout of your latest, or email me that statement, email me this. And so it's just nice to get all the stuff nice and easy. And once I found out that you actually negotiate your rate every year, which is foreign. Because when I was working in the U.S., adjustable rate mortgages, which most of the world uses,
Yeah.
Americans are like, oh, how could you do an adjustable rate mortgage? Because they think in terms of the U.S.'s adjustable rate mortgages, which usually looks like this. For 3 years, you're going to get this really, really nice interest rate. And then we can kick it in whatever direction, depending on, you know, depending on the LIBOR or whatever, you know. I'm not going to go into too many technical details. There's a governmental number, right? So based on that, we will determine how much you're going to pay. We get to decide what that number is.
Yeah.
Right? So we'll start you off at, let's say, 3%. And then we're going to look and, oh, the LIBOR's jumped up. So now we're going to jump you up to, let's say, 6%.
Yeah.
Oh, in the following year, that's jumped up again. So now I'm going to jump you up to 8 or 9%, you know?
Yep.
And the bank does it. The bank determines everything. And the bank is the one that has, like, all the power. I knew a lot of people that, you know, essentially had to get rid of their homes because those adjustable rate mortgages adjusted so much higher that their payments doubled. Or, you know, and they just couldn't afford their homes anymore. And that was part of what happened, you know, back in, 2006. So here here's your interest rate. In a year we'll talk. Let's say you do a year at that rate. And then you talk and they go, okay, so it's now time for us to discuss your interest rate. You're like, what? We talk about this? So then it becomes a conversation that says, here's the different things that we have. And, oh, we noticed that you're now at, you know, the 80% equity mark, right? You no longer have whatever. And so, oh, we'll give you a lowering of your interest rate. You know, I don't have to ask for that. I don't have to force them to do these things. I don't have to try to pull teeth in order to get that to happen, you know? And then we just refied this house with another bank. And the idea that the bank gave us money at settlement is strange, okay? That they say, here's this lump sum of money. And I was like, well, why are you giving me this? You know, it's like, well, you're with our bank now, so we're going to give you this money to help you pay the lawyer fees and this and that. And I was like, why are you paying me this money? I still don't understand. But
did they just put it on your mortgage, or?
You can, but they'll just put it in your bank account. You know.
What do you mean? I don't understand. Where did the money come from?
The bank.
So they lent you the money, like up front?
Well, they
didn't just give it you, did they?
Well, no, they lent us the mortgage, right?
Yes.
That's what they did. They said, okay, we're going to do this mortgage. And then because this is your mortgage, once you settle with us and sign all the paperwork, we're going to put like $3,000 in your bank account.
What, just like as a present, or?
Yeah, they said, because you're going to go with us. As long as you have your loan with us. I know, they were like, as long as you have your loan with us for the next 3 years, here's your money.
Why did I not know about that?
Yeah, well, why didn't I know? You know, and a lot of it boils down to the fact that here, banks make their money by servicing loans.
Right.
In the States, that's not always true. A lot of them get their money by selling your loan to somebody else who services it.
Okay.
And since the money they get is from servicing your loans, they want you to stay. And so they give you incentives to stay. So it puts slightly more power in, you know, the borrower's hands. Right? And it's just a little extra thing that just tells you, oh, I live in New Zealand. You know, it's just a little different to kind of go, which, of course, in my brain is, well, how are they screwing me? There's got to be a different way.
What's the catch?
Yes, there's always, that is always in my brain is, what's the catch?
Fascinating. I think we're going to have to. I think we're going to have to do part 2 because there's just honestly, I didn't know that, and it's just you've got lots of things to share. Brian has just written down, ask about the cars. So what? Just like what cars? Was it easier to buy a car? Is that what you think? It was like, was it easier to buy cars in the US in New Zealand?
Yeah, I think that goes with the how quick the automation is where it comes to, we just recently sold a car, so we did what everybody does and goes to Trade Me, because they sell everything on, the world is sold on Trade Me. And we put a car up and eventually somebody came out and test drove the car and they decided they wanted to buy it. So, okay, we negotiated a price. The entire process took place, in my driveway, where he said, how much? And we said, okay. So we came up with a number, and he gets on his phone, he gets on his bank, and he says, I'm going to transfer this amount of money to this person. And I look over, and he hits send, and he says, look, this is what I did. And I look at it and go, okay, it'll probably be in there tomorrow. And okay, so then I get on my little website, the government's website that says, I'm selling this car to this person. Okay, I hit okay. They get on there and say, hey, I'm that person buying the car from Brian.
Oh, wow.
Great. Hit okay. That was it.
Yeah.
The license plates go with the car, not the person. Because I know, in the States, it can take days to get this processed because I've got to get the little piece of paper that says I own this car. And I sign that piece of paper, and I have to go to the government building, and I have to take my license plates, and I have to turn those in one place, go to another place, hand in that piece of paper so that they can reprint it to say the other person owns this car, and that they have to go and they have to get license plates specifically for that car and that person, and then they go and they do their thing, and it's just this whole process. And then, of course, I have to declare it because on the government paperwork, I say I sold it for this amount of money so that they can get taxed from me at the end of the year because that's taxed as income.
Right, yep.
And here it's just very much like, no, Steve bought the car. I'm like, yep. Thanks, Steve.
I love it. It's so ahead of its time, isn't it? People tend to think, oh yeah, New Zealand, we've done a podcast about this. Is it behind the times? It's way, way ahead of its time, isn't it, to the rest of the world? It
absolutely is. One of my Kiwi buddies said it best when he said, we don't get things quickly, but when we do, we get the best because it's already been tested by all these other countries or it's been tested by all these other areas. So once we get it, I mean, people don't realize that for speed of internet, New Zealand is one of the top countries.
Yes, it is. Yeah, we've talked about that. It's true.
Yeah, and it doesn't make any sense because here we are at the end of we are literally at the end of the internet.
Yeah.
But somehow we have really great speeds and we've got really great internet.
Have you seen that thing, Ryan, in the sky where what is it, Brian? The thing that pardon?
Oh, the Google balloons or whatever?
Yeah. Is it got the Google balloons where they're just like, there's a line of them going through the sky at night? Starlink, is it? Yeah, he's saying Starlink.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. That's weird.
It's just like floating internet.
I know.
It's fascinating.
It's what?
It's available in New Zealand for $160 a month.
Oh, it's available in New Zealand for $160 a month, Bryce saying. So you should have spoke to Brian about this because I don't know anything about that.
Yeah. But it's just that fascinating thing of coming in here and just going, everything is just so simple and so automated.
I know, it's easy. That's what I think too. Yeah. It's easy.
And that just seems to be the goal of let's just not complicate things.
Yes.
I find all the government, the private public partnerships that happen in New Zealand, there's not a lot of big government buildings, for example, right? It's like, if I wanted to, when I came to get my license for New Zealand, I just had to bring my U.S. license that said I've been driving for a while, and I took it to, AA.
Yeah. I know. How easy is that to get a new license? Like, just have your photo taken and in the AA building, you say.
It took me about 40 minutes to find it because I kept driving past, because I kept going, this is the address they told me to go to, but there's no giant government building that I have to sit in 20 different queues to, it's like, oh no, it's just this little lady in the back of this shop. She's like, I handle this. Oh, okay. So that all those processes are so fascinating.
Can I ask you a question?
Taxes and,
Can I ask you a question, Ryan? People say to me, they're always pulling me up on this. They're like, oh, you're just trying to make New Zealand sound so perfect, and it can't be that perfect. What's its faults? What would you say? What would you say New Zealand's faults were? If someone said that to you, what would your answer be?
I think it's kind of some of the stuff we touched on. Some people would view some of these things as faults, like shipping. It takes forever to get some stuff. If it's not made here, it's going to take a while. And any interruptions in shipping could affect your life. When somebody had blocked the Suez Canal, there was stuff that we went, I guess we won't have stuff for a while,
well, there goes the part for my lawnmower.
I mean, we get a lot of stuff from Australia, which is good. So that shipping doesn't get messed up very much. But you just have to understand that stuff takes a while to get here.
Yeah. I mean, I know no country's perfect, obviously, and I always say that. It's like, of course it's not perfect. Which country is, but I don't know. I love New Zealand. I really do,
Yeah, I find it difficult to find faults at times.
I know.
Now, there's still a lot of the same faults that come in, but I feel like the big difference is I think there's some stuff that New Zealand's trying to rectify, whether it's stuff like dealing with the Maori, just the years of oppression.
Yes.
And the government acknowledges it and says, look, we recognize it's a thing and we're going to try to do some stuff to help. But, and just at least saying, we know there's a problem.
Yeah.
Is at least enough to make people go, oh, you're trying to think about it and you're trying to work through these issues and it's not, and so I think even when you look at some of those faults, the housing prices, everybody that lives in New Zealand knows that the housing prices are ridiculous, okay? And they've just shot up. And the government is trying to do stuff. Now, people will argue back and forth the best way to handle those things, right? But acknowledging that it's a problem is the best start, right? Because there's a lot of countries that just won't. They'll say that's not a problem, or they'll just look and they'd say stuff like, well, the housing prices rising are great, right? I mean, everybody's getting equity in their homes and blah, 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 blah. And there's a lot of people going, but the poor people, and so to be able to at least go, we know that's a problem.
Yeah.
And we're working on it.
Yeah.
We haven't found the solution yet, but we're trying different things. And, hopefully that'll work out at some point. So I think that's the biggest thing. So when I look at some of those kind of, okay, this could be better, there's at least an acknowledgement that people are trying to make it better.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for answering that. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear how other people would what their answer would be. But yeah, thank you. Yeah. Right. Oh, look, we're up to 50 minutes already. So I just want to...
We'll edit some of this out.
I didn't know.
My son appearing, we can edit that
out. Before we go, what would you say, because people, they're coming over and they're shipping their stuff, and they said, that, please will you ask Ryan what he didn't bring that he wished he'd had, and what he brought that he thought, why did I bring that? What would you say?
Yeah, I think for the most part we didn't. I don't know that there's anything we regretted not bringing.
Right.
There's a couple. There's a couple of small things, small personal items that we probably wanted to bring, but that just kind of goes to the overall thought process of, I think, if it's meaningful to you, figure out a way to bring it. At least if you're going to be here long term. If it's not meaningful, ditch it. Just get rid of it.
But how do you decide if it's meaningful or not? Because, like, at first you think everything's meaningful, don't you? It's hard to do that.
Yeah, you gotta Marie Kondo that stuff. You know, you gotta, like, does this bring me joy?
Yeah, that's a good point. Have I worn this in the last 3 years? Or, does it bring me joy? Or, it's a good tip.
Yeah. So I say stuff like furniture, don't even,
really?
Again, unless it's grandmother's ancient thing that you absolutely have to have, don't bother. I remember we just decided to basically sell everything when it came to furniture. And we were glad we did. Why
were you glad that you did?
Because we ended up replacing the stuff a lot cheaper than we thought.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah, because at least in Auckland, I can tell you in Auckland, there's a lot of good secondhand shops.
Right.
There's a lot of op shops, and there's a lot of good secondhand furniture shops. So we ended up not spending a whole lot of money to, completely furnish a 4-bedroom home, and we actually had budgeted quite a bit more than we spent. So that was nice. And realistically, I mean, the furniture that you might think you want might not work with the space.
That's true. That's true.
Because especially in the U.S., where you might have a lot of bigger furniture, and the houses here don't tend to be as large.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that kind of thought process that bringing your giant sectional couch might not fit in your Kiwi home.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so when you talk about stuff like, it's like, do you really want to bring your bed when the beds aren't the exact same sizes? And then you'd have to try to figure out sheets to fit your beds, to do those kind of, so there's a lot of just those little logistic things. Electronics and stuff, I say pretty much keep them at home, sell them, get rid of them, unless you know with absolute certainty that it will work with the different voltage. Because the little converters usually don't convert the voltage, and I fried several things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because a lot of, like, let's say laptops and stuff, you get a different power cord, and everything's fine because they're built to go all over the world. I think my PC, my desktop, actually had something that I plugged in, and it took seconds to fry, just because it just wasn't prepped for it. So that kind of stuff. So that's just going to be my long-winded answer on that. If it's meaningful, bring it. If it's not, clothes, bring. Yeah. I will tell you, clothes, bring them. Because it's going to take you a while to figure out where you like to shop.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
So for no other reason than that, just to be able to go, all right, I think just before I moved here, I bought, like several packs of socks and underwear. Just because I'm like, I know these work, and I'm going to be happy with these.
Yeah, yes. We did the same.
Time to figure it out.
We did the same. We went to Marks and Spencer's before we came over, and we bought like a load of underwear because that's I agree.
Yeah, and you'll eventually figure out that some of the op shops have some really nice stuff and that kind of thing. But you start realizing what stores you like and what you like to shop and what you're looking for. But when you first come over, there's so many things you're thinking about. The last thing you want to do is to say, I need a new shirt. Yeah, you don't want that to have to be part of what's on your radar.
Yeah. We brought everything. When we came from the UK, we brought everything basically. And
really?
Yeah, we did. And so it's interesting to talk to someone who didn't, because actually I agree with you on so many points. We've still in our garage, we've got 2 tables that we've never been able to bring out because we don't have the room for them. So they're there. And like you say, when that shipping container leaves and you get on the plane, you have that feeling of lightness, don't you? And you almost, I don't know, when our stuff turned up, I mean, I know the kids were like really excited because they had all their toys and stuff, but I think if I was to do it again, I think I would do exactly the same as you just said. I would get rid of as much as I can and just bring bare minimal. But
I think we recognized that it takes months to get your stuff here. Okay, so if you need it, if you need something, you're going to have already gone out to buy it, And if you didn't need it, then why did you spend the money to ship it? You know, that's the mentality that I think we got to. So we did ship some toys and that kind of stuff. I can say probably the only thing I kind of regret not bringing, I sold a lot of my music stuff.
Right.
At that, I kind of regret. I'm like, oh, I wish I still had my guitar, you know, that kind of stuff. But I ended up replacing it and all. But so stuff like that. I was like, oh, that guitar did bring me joy. I should have brought that. But aside from that, you know, because shipping is expensive. Even doing it on the cheap, it's not super cheap.
How much did you pay for your shipping?
We ended up, and this was 4 years ago, I think we managed to get, I want to say it was 54 boxes is what we ended up shipping. Okay. Because
in a container or?
Yeah, in a container. We found a shipping company because from the States, there's a couple of like major providers that are ridiculously expensive. I mean, like my first quote was something like $12,000, and we were like, and I talked to another smaller shipper, and it was something like $4. I want to say somewhere around $4-ish. It was a huge difference, and I actually asked him why, because, you know, again, American, it started triggering like, what am I not getting? Are you just going to burn my stuff? So, but the big thing is like the big people, they come in, you're paying for their name first off, but you're also paying, they send out a team of people to pack all the boxes, write the notes of everything that's in the boxes so that everything it's got a nice shipping manifest and everything's perfect, and then they load everything into the thing. The company I went with, they said, we're going to send you one guy in a truck and you're going to help him load. Okay, you have to fill out your manifest of what's in those boxes. Okay. And that's basically what it is. You do most of the legwork, and we'll just handle the shipping side of things, and that's it.
And that's why it was cheaper.
Yes.
That's so
but
true.
But for the price difference, I'll do it. I'll do it all, you know?
Yeah. See, when we came over, we used Pickford's, which is a big company in the UK, and it's a big company over here. Or they, you know, and we went for that, you know, the white glove service because I don't know why, but we felt like we were quite wealthy when we were coming over to New Zealand. The dollar was a lot, like I think it was almost 3 to 1 or something like that, and it was just bliss. And so we went, oh no, we can have the guys coming in and packing it all up and shipping it and. But like you say, if the difference in price, God, $12,000 to $4,000, I'll pack it myself, thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just spent a lot of time doing that. It's all right. I did up the manifest, and then it was very much like, we just hire like some local movers to bring the stuff to your house. You know, it's like we don't even know who we'll use until it gets there. But it all worked out in the end. Yeah. So we got what we wanted to, and then really probably again out of those 54 boxes, there was probably a good third of them that we went, oh, why did we bring this? So,
I hate this.
I know. We replaced that anyway. Yeah. What's the point? You know.
Oh, Ryan. Well, thank you so much for just all that valuable information. It's honestly, I'm so happy that you came on and shared that with us because,
thank you.
It's been an absolute joy, and you're gorgeous to talk to, and it's just, I think we could just talk forever, couldn't we? It's just like, tell us the story.
Well, I hope you can pare this conversation down to your manageable level.
No, because what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to just put it on my podcast, which the podcast, people love it. You know, it's just, they love as much information as they can get. And I know that when I was coming to New Zealand, and probably the same with you could listen for hours and hours about stuff that you needed to know. So, no, I'm not taking anything out of this. Absolutely not.
Yeah, and sometimes I just miss the starkly practical stuff. I tend to be a very practical person, so I like to hear those very like, do not do this, do this, and here's why.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. Well, I'm sure this won't be the last time me and you talk, but until the next time I speak to you, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Excellent. No worries. Thank you.
I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast this week. We have loved having you here with us.
If you love this week's show, please share this with your friends. Send it to anybody you know that wants to think about moving to New Zealand, and get on over here yourself.
And tell them how brilliant it is as well. And also, if you haven't signed up for our free 5-day video guide showing you what life is like, really like, in New Zealand, then go over to the website and sign up. You are missing out. This is brilliant. Go over to www.nzahead.com/free and we will send you 5 days worth of videos about what life is like in New Zealand. You are going to love it. So one more time, that website that you need to sign up for the free 5-day guide is www.nzahead.com/free. So we're going to see you next week. Until then, have a great week and we'll speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Say bye again. Bye.
Bye.